Thank you all for joining us today with your time and experience. Alex, would you like to get us started with presentations?
Sure. Thank you very much. Good afternoon, everyone. It's an honor to be here with each of you in the cloud. Rising Tide Capital is a nonprofit organization that I co-founded 10 years ago. We work, you could say, on the education side of microfinance in inner city communities in New Jersey, working with people to help them start and grow successful businesses. For a webinar on results, I figured it might make sense to start by sharing some of our own. There we go. As of the end of 2013, we had 838 graduates of our program. 397 of them are in business today with, oh, my slides are now out of order. With 363 in the pipeline. We know that every 7 days a new business opens. Most importantly, the question is, do these businesses make a difference? And we track that primarily by taking a look at the way in which business revenue increases after people go through our program and the way that that impacts their household income. So we see an average 157% increase in business revenue and 26% increase in household income. And overall, while we track a lot of other things, these things allow us to be able to say that for every dollar that our donors invest in our programs, we produce $3.80 in local economic impact. Now, I am extremely happy and proud, not just to be able to look at these numbers and say, okay, it looks like the model is working, but just to be able to have the numbers themselves has been a journey that has taken a long time. And I would have to say, after 10 years, that it is by far the hardest thing that we've ever tried to do at Rising Tide Capital. It's hard. It's harder than fundraising. It's harder than everything. And I think it's hard not just because you need to build a database and there's a lot of complicated technology and paperwork and data entry involved. It's hard really primarily because it's an existential journey that requires you to really evaluate what your organization exists to do and what it is capable of achieving in the short term and the long term. And it's an iterative process. I'm going to get into some of the challenges that we've faced and talk a little bit about that. But I guess just to fast forward to one of my main points, in case nothing else I say is helpful, I would say that it is one of the main concepts that helps in this journey is what I would call reverse engineering. If you look through the different statements I made about Rising Tide Capital and introducing us, there were statements that I said about what we have achieved, how we measure it, and you, with your individual organizations, can go through this process, if you don't already have an outcome measurement system up in place, by identifying some statements that you would like to be able to make about your organization, and then reverse engineering back from those statements to the kinds of activities that you need to take and the kinds of measurements that you'll need to take in order to be able to say them. The part of the challenge, and I'm sorry that my slide is a little skewed here, is essentially that being able to reverse engineer really ends up involving being able to translate vision to impact. And the key part of being able to do that, and the kind of the mission and the vision is this big grand idea that all motivates us: sustainability and local resilience and economic opportunity. But turning that into real concrete change in the world requires a program model. And it reminds me of a story when we were first starting out at Rising Tide, one of our earliest fundraising meetings. We went in and we talked about this really great mission that we had and everything that we were trying to do. And the person looked at us and said, you seem like really sweet people and it sounds like a great idea, but please come back to me when you've got something with handlebars. And I didn't really know what that meant at the beginning, but over time it became clear to me that what they were saying was that doing good in the world is not enough. It is not enough just to go out there and have a good cause. You can do it, but the world will not necessarily respond philanthropically unless you can present to them something with quote unquote handlebars, meaning something that has a beginning and an end. Because only things that have a beginning and an end can really be measured. Now, you may repeat the same activity over and over again and make that better and improve it and enhance it over time. But you need to turn your kind of amorphous vision into something that is very, very concrete and has a time-bounded aspect to it, because time-boundedness is necessary for measurement. The challenge about turning your mission vision into a program design that leads to outcomes it essentially ends up, the way I usually describe it, is that it has to do with picking the right needle that you are going to track in terms of looking for the ability to move needle. I'm tripping over my words here. We're looking to move the needle in a lot of different ways in the world and in the social space. The question is, can you articulate a compelling argument that connects what you do in the world to a specific needle that is moving as a result of your work? And the reason why it's difficult to pick the right needle is essentially there are four main challenges. The first is time. A lot of the things that we're trying to achieve in the world are going to take a while to take place. And unfortunately, the funding world is not going to sit there and continue to invest in your model if it has to wait 10 years to determine whether it's actually being successful. So number one, you have to identify a needle that moves in the short term. Usually I would say at least on an annual basis, because grant cycles are usually 12-month grant cycles. And that's difficult. It's difficult emotionally because the most important stuff we're trying to achieve really is often happening over a longer term. But you have to identify something that's going to happen at least on an annual basis that matters and is going to move as a result of your efforts. The second challenge is quantifiability. Many of us are trying to change things in the world that may not necessarily lead itself to being measured directly. Hope, community pride. These are things that have a real difference, but it's difficult to figure out how to measure it. And essentially what is required is to identify what's called a proxy, which is something that you can measure, that you can justify saying, if this is happening, this is happening. And so for community pride, for example, maybe you measure that by the amount of litter that you find in the local park in weekly cleanup days, and you want to see that amount of litter decrease. And your theory is that that is a symbol of the amount of pride that the community is taking. Quantifiability is the second challenge. The third challenge is accessibility. Information is very difficult to access. Sometimes it is very time consuming to gather. And sometimes people just may not be willing to share the information that you would need in order to be able to complete your measurement schema. And so what you need to do is essentially identify a metric that you are going to track, and as part of your evaluation process in selecting that metric or the few metrics that you do, is how am I actually going to go about gathering this information? How much time will it take to do it? And will I be able to access the information I need? The final thing, as if those three challenges are not hard enough, is how compelling the needles, the numbers that you're tracking are in terms of connecting to your overall vision. And so essentially, when you unite all of these together, you get what is sometimes called a theory of change. And essentially what you need, even though we didn't develop our theory of change until many years into the life of our organization. But there needs to be a logical connection and alignment between the activities that you are engaging with and the outcomes, the results that you're seeing in the world, and the long-term impact that you believe is going to happen if these things happen in the near term. Essentially, outcomes are measured change. They are units of change. And the question that confronts all of us is, what does a unit of change look like in our mission? And what kind of program activities do we need to undertake to produce it? I'm running out of time, so I'm just going to end with a final comment about the fact that outcome measurement is extremely helpful. It's becoming a requirement for fundraising purposes. But the real goal here in developing an information architecture in your organization is not just to be able to have talking points that you're able to communicate to the outside world and to the funders. It's to develop internal dashboards that help you manage your performance and monitor your performance, and essentially to become a learning organization. So I will end it there. Thank you very much for your time. I'll turn it over.
Great. Thank you so much, Alex. This is Susan Miller with Bali speaking, and I'm going to walk you through some of the work that we're doing here at Bali related to metrics. I think you're going to hear a lot of the same themes, and I loved what Alex said about the existential journey that he felt this was for his organization, because I think I can describe the same. We've been on it for a couple of years through some generous funding through the Cerdna Foundation and in collaboration with lots of our affiliates and partners in the Bali community. So what I have on this first slide is the Bali model of change, and it very much relates to what Alex described. What it is designed to capture is how we are focusing on key indicators that relate specifically to Bali's role in promoting vibrant local economies through our work with business conveners around North America. So what we're trying to look at in terms of our metrics project is a way to measure key elements of our work directly and also create field metrics that help all of the organizations that we work with. And it's a pretty tall order. So we're looking for a few things: metrics and proof points that work across the diversity of the communities, programs, and organizations that represent the Bali community, establishing a baseline of data to track change over time, trying to leverage resources and tools in the wisest way possible through partnering and efficiencies, because we all have limited time and resources. And as Alex alluded to, this work is hard. It requires technology. It requires an investment of time. And then our project is a combination of quantitative and qualitative data, which I'll show you a little bit more about. So the model in front of you really reflects how we think change happens through Bali's work in the world, and how we can measure some key metrics along the way in these 4 key buckets. So on the left-hand side are what we call kind of the inputs, activities, and direct outcomes, with Bali programming itself in the first box. So really, how is Bali working to build the field of localism? And with our Bali affiliates, our members, our fellows, all the communities that we work with, who are all business conveners. So how are these business conveners building localism in their place? Moving over to the intermediate outcomes, what we are all working with local business. And so what we'd like to see is how our business practice is changing over time, and how are they different from the mainstream as a set of proof points about this work. And then moving further out are what we call the aspirational outcomes. So how are local communities and economies manifesting the change that we want to see? And this, of course, is as you move further through the spectrum, it gets a little bit further removed from our direct work and a little bit harder to create kind of the through line and the reverse engineering that Alex talked about. So I'm going to go into a little bit more detail about each of these boxes, and I'm hoping that my slides are where they should be. So let me see if I can get to them. Okay. we have some really interesting stuff in this first box. So let me tell you what should be there. So I'm trying to give you a little bit of a drill down on some of the sample metrics in each of these areas. So for Bali's programs, we have 3 key work pillars that we're organizing our metrics around: connecting leaders, spreading solutions, and attracting investment. So what that box to the right should show is some information on individual and organizational profiles and demographics, program outputs, meaning reach, participation, program outcomes, meaning satisfaction and results of programs, and then some other key metrics. For our affiliates, we're looking to gather broad information from all the business conveners that we work with in similar ways, and we're organizing those around these themes that you see of local first, entrepreneur support, community capital, better together, prosperity for all, and transformational development. So again, you can see the detailed metrics that we're organizing against those themes. And we're hoping that these speak to the collective work that we're all doing, and it's data that we are looking to collect, aggregate, and share back out so that it is useful for Bali to talk about the broader work and for the community to have proof points and data to use as well. We keep jumping around. I'm so sorry. Let's see. Okay. So moving over to the intermediate outcomes, this is a list of some of the sample metrics that we're looking to collect on Localist business. This is not an exhaustive list, but it's just some examples. And here we are organizing the metrics against the tenets that Stacey mentioned at the beginning of the call. I'm going to talk a lot more about this piece in the next few slides because we have decided to partner with BLab to use their B impact assessment to collect this kind of information from the broad business community that we all work with. So more to come on that. And then in terms of the sample metrics on local economies, I would call this, at this stage of development, almost a wish list. These are the types of outcomes that Alex talked about that are kind of the long-term and aspirational goals of the work. They're often very hard to tie directly to the programs that we all run and the communities we work with, but they're the important outcomes. So to the extent that we are able to identify useful proxies or ways of gathering or tagging key outcomes that we can all kind of keep our eye on, Bali would like to try to do that for the field. And this is a bit of phase 2 of our project. So the earlier 2 pieces are well in the works and we're beginning to collect data as we speak. And this third piece is more of a phase 2 that we're working on. So this next slide, just to give you a sense of how we're collecting the data and how we see sharing it out. We have developed and are developing a set of survey tools to gather similar information from lots of different members of our community at regular intervals. We're also looking at building our systems to collect much better and more rigorous data at various points of registration and other interaction. The second piece in red is the Bali BLab Quick Impact Assessment, which I will talk a little bit more about next. And then the next piece is important. The green box talks about qualitative and story capture. So we are really thinking of these going hand in hand. So as much as the metrics and the quantifiable measures really matter, we also want to tie those to stories so that they kind of come alive. And we're looking for various tools and platforms to help us do that. On the reporting side, just to give you a sense of what we have in the works, we're looking at kind of an aggregate report that we would be able to share with various stakeholders, probably on an annual basis. We're looking internally at regular and sort of ad hoc reporting in coordination with our program teams. We're looking at dashboards very similar to what Alex showed you for us to use internally for regular program monitoring and decision making. And we're looking at generating these custom quick impact reports. I'll talk more about that. And then with BALLE's role of convening, we're looking to build some effective affinity group spaces for peer sharing. We know there was a lot of interest in this webinar, and we're hoping to continue the momentum on that. Okay, let me try to get back to where I need to be here. So just to give you a quick sense before I move into the B-Lab partnership, this is some of the sample output that we've been starting to generate based on the tools we're building. This is a report that shows some outcomes from our local economy fellowship program. And as you can see, we've got some data and statistics about connections, about new skills, about leadership, about new funding that have really helped us give some meat to some of the stories for the outcomes for the fellowship. And then as an example of tying in the more qualitative and descriptive pieces, here are some stories about our fellows and some quotes about the program. Okay, so I have just a few more minutes. I want to quickly review our partnership with B-Lab and the quick impact assessment tool that we are currently piloting and will be making more broadly available in the spring. My colleague Alyssa Hillary will also talk about her experience using this tool in Grand Rapids. So what we've decided to do, many of you may be familiar with the B-Lab Business Impact Assessment, the BIA, which is a fairly long, rigorous online assessment tool that helps businesses learn about being a force for good and measure their progress toward those goals. We have collaborated with B-Lab on a custom version of that tool that is shorter and focused on what we think is important for the localism movement. We've also added some custom questions that relate to business collaboration and involvement in community decision-making and community well-being that are not currently part of the BIA. So we think of this as a win-win. What we are piloting right now with about 12 communities throughout North America is having each business convener engage their groups of businesses to take this free short online assessment. It's a way for businesses to learn about how they can improve their work in their local communities. And then it provides Bali and the participating affiliate conveners some aggregate data and proof points about their groups of businesses. So we're hoping over time to build a baseline and a data set about how our businesses look different from mainstream business and how change is happening over time and why this work matters. Quick overview of how it works. The Bali affiliates invite their businesses to participate. The businesses take the quick impact assessment. Businesses receive some nice instant feedback with a snapshot. Affiliates work with the businesses on technical assistance and programming. Affiliates receive access to results for individual businesses and aggregate so that each of us can be benchmarking and looking at our results over time. And we have some real data to celebrate with the press and with funders and with various other stakeholders in the work. This is just a real quick example of what the landing page looks like that a business would see. Another benefit of this is that more and more businesses, we hope, will start hearing about localism, learning that each local affiliate is part of this broader North American movement, and getting a little bit more exposure to some of the concepts and values that we think are really important. And then just to give you a real quick sense, the great thing about partnering with B-Lab is that they have a pretty sophisticated back-end analytics platform that Bali has a license to use and to share with our affiliates, so that we're able to do a lot of sophisticated graphing, charting, time series analysis, and filtering. So our goal is to be able to provide a lot of custom data and reporting for the participating affiliates. So this is one example of some of the charting capability. Whoops. I'm sorry, I'm previewing Alyssa's slides here. And this is another example In this case, we're looking question by question at the QIA, and each affiliate would be able to see for their group of businesses where they're above average, where they're at average, and where they're below average. So it gives the local first organization or incubator or other convener a place to focus its programming. Like, wow, my group of businesses is doing great on diversity in this element, but really needs to work on, you know, the male to female salary ratio. So it gives us a way to really drill down on how we can support the change that we're most interested in seeing. So just to wrap up my portion, as I mentioned, we are currently piloting the QIA in 12 communities. We are finalizing what that analytics platform will look like and what the program will look like. And we are looking to roll it out more broadly in the spring. And we'll look forward to sharing information with many of you about that. Thank you.
Thanks, Susan. Alyssa, will you fill us in a little more on the pilot project and some things that you're doing in Michigan?
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us on this webinar. I will certainly continue the conversation about the quick impact assessment and how we're integrating that into our efforts. But before I do that, I want to step back a little bit and explain how we've gotten to the point where it's good for us to be using this impact assessment and we're ready as an organization to be doing that. So I just want to give a little background first. So our organization has existed for about 10 years now. We're working with over 800 businesses throughout Western Michigan, which is about a 13-county area. And we've struggled over time with how to measure our impact. We have a whole array of different types of programs and campaigns, and some of them are easier to measure than others. And my thinking around how we measure our impact really changed a couple of years ago when I went through the BALLE fellowship, because BALLE brought in a metrics expert who helped us realize that there were in some ways I was overcomplicating what we needed to measure to report to funders, and in other ways maybe undercomplicating it. So I want to go back and talk through some of the really simple things that we've started to track over time that have gotten us traction and funding to be able to move to this next step. And then I'm going to talk about how we're integrating the quick impact assessment. So real quickly, how do we think about measuring our impact? Well, a lot of our programs are around building relationships. And so we have monthly member mixers. And after each member mixer, we have a SurveyMonkey license, which costs us just $200 a year for unlimited surveying. And after every member mixer, we send out a survey to our businesses to find out if they made a meaningful connection, if they found someone at that mixer that they're starting to do business with, if they built a personal connection at that. So we've been able to track that data over time. In addition, we track attendance at those kinds of things. We have sustainable business education events like the conference featured here. And at the end of each of those events, we have a survey that we ask people to take out. So really some very simple things that have allowed us over time to start to build data about our programming. And at the conference, as that program has evolved over time, we've asked people if they've been at the conference, not just about feedback from the conference that they're at, but also about if they've been at a previous conference, have they implemented something new in their business since that time that they were inspired to do because they've heard of this conference. So we've gotten good data that way. Some of our events are not just for businesses, they're for the community. And so we've been able to use measurables like attendance and financial support from other businesses and sponsors as ways to show our impact on the community and support for our organization, and then leverage that to get funding and to develop programs. This is another example of that. Some of our programs are around direct sales or trying to encourage direct sales at businesses. So we run a holiday shopping campaign encouraging people to buy local then, and we've worked with the Institute for Local Self-Reliance to measure that data. I'll talk more about them in a second. We also measure impressions of things. That's one of the things that this researcher had helped me realize, that we were doing all this marketing and promotion, and while we didn't necessarily know at that time if it was having an effect, measuring the impressions was still helpful. So, for example, knowing that we're distributing 10,000 copies of a directory means at least 10,000 people are seeing that, hopefully, and hopefully multiple people are seeing each copy. We also track all of the data that, all of the visits to our website and all the interactions there and what resources people are going to. And so over 10 years, we've built quite the pool of this information. This last year, we launched a larger public education campaign, and while it had some outdoor elements like billboards that we could get, it was harder to track data on. We could still track impressions, but we made sure to include online pieces so we could really get click-throughs too, and then we use that data to go back to our businesses to show them value in underwriting programs that they're participating in with us, and also to take it to larger funders to show, hey, people are in fact interested in these kinds of metrics. So it's all these little areas where we could just place an ad and not track it, but we've started to track everything, and we've grown quite a big body of data around that. This slide's not coming through too well, but this basically is looking at tracking our media coverage and impressions that way over time, as well as our online presence. And one thing that we found extremely helpful in attaining funding is participating in the Institute for Local Self-Reliance's post-holiday sales survey each year. So if you've not done this, this is a partnership opportunity with other independent business organizations, and you can purchase your area-specific data from them. This is ours from last year, and we've been participating since I think year 2. So we have 5 years worth of data then about how our campaign is affecting our community. We also, over time, have purchased survey support from our area university, Grand Valley State University. They have a terrific research department, and they've done community phone surveys for us to measure our impact, to find out if people's ideas about sustainability or supporting local business have changed over time. And once again, those are things that we've repeated. So about every 2 to 3 years, we purchase more time, and they survey the community again and again and again, so we can show our impact. I didn't want to repeat the slides that Susan had, but I want to talk briefly about how we got to the point where it made sense for us to participate in this quick impact analysis and actually to pre-pilot before anyone else in the country. And really, it came about because for the last 2 years, I've been on this metrics committee with BALLE, as we've been trying to figure out how to take this qualitative information we have about our businesses and their impact on the community and turn it into something quantifiable, so that we had hard data to be able to show back to our funders. And so I'm very excited about this partnership with B Corp because I think it will do just that. We have all kinds of stories about how our local businesses are treating their employees really well. They're giving back philanthropically. They're creating new programs that are fixing problems in the community. They're reducing their waste. They're composting and recycling and all those things. And many of those, some of those things, those businesses have just been doing since the beginning of their business, and others are new practices that have come about over time through some of our educational programming and through some of our peer-to-peer best practice sharing. And so this quick impact analysis will actually allow us to get a baseline on our businesses and their behavior on the triple bottom line, and then also to create programming that over time will hopefully help them improve. And we're really excited about this because for a number of reasons. One is that back-end data that Susan showed that affects the overall community. We actually were able to receive a grant from the Grand Rapids Community Foundation to hire a staff person to get our businesses to take the quick impact assessment, because we were able to make the case that if we could get enough businesses to start measuring where they were at, and we could collect that data, that we could create educational programming, and we could eventually move the needle on some real big community indicators. So I would encourage you, if you're at a point where you're able to do that, to get people to take it. We've had, or to be part of the program in the spring. We've had over 20 businesses complete the Quick Impact Assessment so far. They found it very helpful as a sustainable business assessment for their business. They've been from all different sectors. So we've had some retailers, we've had some restaurateurs, we had a local chocolate producer. It's been relevant for all of them. We had an IT company. They're all different sizes and scales of businesses. So I think this tool is relevant for all of those types. And we've had a number more look at it, and we're really just starting to get the word out about it. But there's been terrific enthusiasm from the business community. And I'll leave it at that and turn it over to questions.
Thanks, Alyssa. Thanks to all of you guys for sharing information. I'm sorry that we're having some technological difficulties with the slides, but I think that people should have gotten a briefing on what it is that you're doing in your communities. We're going to open it up to Q&A for the next 10 minutes. I do not see any questions yet in the chat box. If you have a question, please type it in now, and I'm glad to direct it at one of our speakers. While you guys are thinking, I have a question. So one of the things that I think as a previous network leader is not only is figuring out what questions to ask, but how you actually get people to fill out surveys and give you the information that they need. So I'm kind of looking to Alyssa and Alex for this. If you guys want to chime in and talk about what you've done to be successful as leaders in retrieving that information.
This is Alex. I can respond first. It is very challenging. And I would say number one is to the point I wasn't able to make in my opening remarks is that at the initiation of your activities, you have an opportunity to ask many, many more things than you will have an opportunity to track later. And it does become a growing library of data that you can mine and do special initiatives years down the line if you have that benchmarking data. So I guess my first point would be the opportunity that you have at the beginning when somebody filling out a form, that is the kind of prerequisite to participate. You have an opportunity to gather a bunch of stuff at that point. Later on, especially after people have left the room or graduated from the program, that's where it begins to get trickier. One way that we've dealt with it is having a program model that continues to provide services and continues to gather people over time, keeping your relationship close with the people you're working with over time allows you to have many more touch points to get updated. The second thing is, and this is where the kind of existential and emotional aspect of this journey comes in, and where the reverse engineering comes in as well. The smaller the number of questions that you ask of people, the higher likelihood you will have of getting answers. And we have gone from a survey that took an hour per person to a 5-question survey, because at the end of the day, we realized that we were really only using a handful of statements about ourselves over and over again in our public speaking and grant proposals, and that was what really mattered. And we had a bunch of benchmark data if we ever want to study changes in voter registration, for example. We may ask that in our application, but that's no longer part of our annual survey. And so I think paring down to really only the core data that you need is part of the way to get people to participate.
I second everything that Alex just said. We do send out a lot of online surveys, but even still, I found that if people have a paper survey in hand at the end of an event, I feel like they're more likely to fill it out right then than they will later, especially because we usually will, as we're doing our closing remarks, we'll remind people to please fill that out. And when we do email things out, we try to frame it as though we try to make all of our surveys short for businesses. But we also really try to frame things as though we're asking our businesses and organizations feedback so that we can improve services for them. And we found that if we frame it that way, so that it's more about them than us, we get a better response. People aren't as willing to give us feedback about us. We've not really offered incentives. We've thought about that and talked to some of the research companies that we've worked with, and they've not thought that that was necessary for our efforts at this time.
And
Thanks, guys.
This is Susan. I'd love to just chime in quickly. One of the great things I think about the quick impact assessment is that it takes businesses about 20 minutes as opposed to hours for the full assessment. And it was one of the key reasons we have put in the time and effort and resources to co-develop that, because we feel like it will really improve participation.
This is Alyssa. I want to add one other thing about the quick impact assessment. We've actually framed that in our community as us responding to a need that we've seen from the businesses. So of our 800 businesses that we work with, we have 2 that had been regularly publishing sustainability reports. And we knew that, or at least 2 that had shared that with us. We knew that because of other programming and awards that we give and things through the years. And so we've really framed this as, hey, you guys, this is a tool that we've created for you so that you can benchmark your business against other businesses. And even if you don't feel like the whole thing is relevant for you, please take it. There are certain pieces that we know are relevant for you, and we've gotten a good response that way. But it's always by pitching it as something for them, and then on the, a couple entrepreneurs care that then we get the data and that we're going to provide opportunities, and they like that. But most of them are in it for their own self-interest.
So we have a question in the group chat box I want to pose to both, again, Alex and Alyssa. Susan, if you have comments, you feel free to chime in as well. If you are implementing a program, if you're implementing a program and you're asked to measure one thing, but you find out that something else is more feasible or better to track, how do you approach your funder and explain that it might be a better track, better to track something that was different than was outlined in your grant? Alyssa, I know that you have lots of experience with grant work. Do you want to start that thread?
Sure. I mean, we've changed our metrics in grants over time after we've received funding. If we've worked really hard to make sure that whatever measurables we put in there in the first place were very attainable for us. But then we've also just really gone back and had conversations with funders to say, hey, look, we are continuing to measure this thing that we told you that we would measure, but we're seeing this other thing that we think is more important. And as long as we've had a good relationship with the funder, they've been okay with that. Some have been able to adjust, others have not really been able to adjust, but they've let us submit that information in addition to whatever else we were measuring. Some of that is dependent upon the organization and how much flexibility the program officer has.
Alex, do you have any feedback from your end?
Just 100% agreement. That's been exactly our experience. I think the only thing I would add to it is that essentially conversations around these topics are the perfect opportunity to deepen your relationship with your funding partners. This is where the substance really is. It's where the rubber meets the road. It's what they are trying to make happen in the world, and so they're interested. And they want to learn, and they want a thought partner, as do you. It is not always easy, and sometimes they can't really adjust. So as she mentioned, you may need to still track that other piece of data. But it is a relationship cultivation opportunity just to have the conversation, because it shows that you as an organization are being thoughtful about your approach, and your level of thoughtfulness as demonstrated in the way that you talk about and show your data will go a long way towards building the trust that enables you to grow your funding over time.
Susan, the next question's for you about the assessment tool. Can the quick impact assessment survey be tailored to an area or shortened?
Yeah, let me address that. So the quick impact assessment is already a much shorter version of the longer B impact assessment. It already has tailoring by number of employees and by sector. So that's built in. And depending on those two things, an individual company will see different questions. And the fewer number of employees, a bunch of questions tend to be eliminated about various topics or management topics. We're hopeful that this tool, as Alyssa said, will work for a variety of businesses and a variety of communities. One of our hopes is to start building this kind of aggregate data set where we have lots of similar data across the board. So we'd love to try to keep it as static as possible. Over time, it may well be tailored as other communities get engaged, and if there are new topics or areas that seem relevant, we certainly have room to evolve it over time. B-Lab itself issues revisions to the B impact assessment every 2 years, working in coordination with their standards advisory board. And one of the other great things about this collaboration is that we're hopeful some of the custom questions that we've developed around business collaboration and placemaking may be adopted in the broader B impact assessment over time. So more and more businesses will see those themes and those questions and those practices.
Great, thanks. And if I am saying correctly, I think everyone will receive a link when you get followed up from this webinar that will allow you, if you want to receive more information about the assessment survey and when it'll be available for you, we'll be sending that out. Is that correct, Susan?
Right. We're going to follow up with an ability to sign up to get more information as we expand the program and make it available.
Great. Are there any more questions from the audience? Do you guys, Alyssa, Alex, Susan, I know that you were limited on time to speak today. Is there anything that any of you would like to share with, we have about 3 minutes if you want to share last comments, some tricks of the trade, so to speak.
I guess my last comment would be just reiterating really what's already been said, that measurement systems can get more sophisticated over time, but I would encourage people to not be overwhelmed and to start tracking what you can right now. Especially if you're in a small organization, I know sometimes there are capacity issues, but these are really the tools that will allow you to build and grow over time.
This is Alex. I think that I would just reiterate the point that I ended on, and I cut myself short in order to make the time work. But the real goal here is to be a learning organization. And each of us, I can imagine everybody on the call is working extremely long hours and is passionate and dedicated to the mission that they are a part of. You want to know that it works, if it's worth your time and your passion being spent on it. And so the ability to communicate to the outside world is one thing, but the ability to track internally what's going on and to develop targets, I think, is really where kind of the next level is of organizational performance, is when you start having specific targets that you're shooting for program activity and outreach and whatnot, and you're comparing on a regular basis how you're doing against those targets. It allows you to really change things if they're not working, and to, if they are working, know where to invest more resources in. So outcome measurement itself is one thing, but along with that package is a term that I would call information architecture, that allows you to also track more than just outcomes, but your performance organization-wide, and it really allows you to professionalize the activities that you're engaged with.
Thanks, Alex. Thanks to all of you guys for joining today's call. I want you to save the date for our next webinar, which is October 21st. It's Campaigns That Work. It's going to be at 1 p.m. Pacific time again. We suggest that you treat these calls as an opportunity to bring together groups of your business owners, social entrepreneurs, people in your government offices, policymakers, network leaders, other people in your communities that might be interested in the topic. Perhaps you can listen to the webinar together and spend an hour discussing with your group how you might be able to model it into your community. We encourage you to create your own roundtables. As a reminder, everyone will get a follow-up email with the slides from today. I promise you that they will be cleaned up and no foreign language like you saw in Susan's slide. And you'll be able to follow along with the audio that you've heard today. You also will be asked to participate in a survey and be given the opportunity to sign up to receive more information about the quick assessment tool. You can purchase past recordings of our webinars at bealocalist.org. A huge thank you to each of the speakers today for sharing their time and expertise. And finally, a thanks to all of you for joining the call. We hope to see you again soon. Enjoy your afternoon.